the next few days, the weather around the motu is not looking great. We have gone past the shortest day of the year, but it doesn't feel like the days are getting longer with how wet and overcast everything's been. But that means that we've got the perfect conditions to get some select committee submissions in. As we near the end of the term before the election, we know that there's an uptick in unpopular bills, and this is a government that has never been afraid to rush things under urgency, so they don't have to listen to pushback or be held accountable or face the people face to face that their decisions are going to harm. But select committees are an important element of the process of how our democracy works, and the Clerk of the House announced last week that this term has seen more submissions made to committees than ever before. It's almost like an avalanche of shitty ideas and harmful policies that treat the wider population like shit, punches down on minorities, and sucks up to the high-paying donors of the coalition is widely unpopular for some reason. Anyway, July 2 is a date that a lot of these controversial bills are having their submission period close. Right? They include the Move On Orders bill that criminalise the homeless people in places that people can see homeless people being homeless while not dealing with the many complicated causes that can lead to homelessness, including mental health. But that's okay because the mental health minister seems fine with exacerbating that for the businesses in his constituency and increasing the risk of discriminatory profiling and punishing people for, needing to survive. Or there's Rema Narkle's act that would stop the government giving any money to any organisation that has links to gangs in any way. Like John Key did in 2010 when his government gave money to a group that had paid mongrel mob leaders to be youth advisors. I'm sorry, did you think that the thing that the Nats vilified and misled the public on to make this act seem like a good idea was something originated by Labour? No, it was John Key all the way. This act would actually cut funding to some of the most effective addiction pathway tools in the country because those connections actually drop barriers for gang members to be able to see a benefit in those programs because it shows relatable successes to them. It can also punish families because, the bill has a really vague definition in the Act of an associated entity, and it treats a public health crisis like a political spectacle. And there's the Conservation Amendment Bill. This is the bill that would allow the government to sell massive chunks of current dockland. Not that they would, according to the Conservation Minister, Tama Potaka. He's been out in force telling voters at the party, the party that promised foreign buyers taxes and then dropped it, or promised new cancer drugs and forgot to fund them and had to pull funds from the next year's budget because of public outcry. The party that promised no frontline service cuts, then cut frontline services. They promised $250 a week in relief, that ended up being $2.50 for some. That promised no reduction in sick leave before changing how sick leave was accrued. They promised the first home buyers grant would continue, but then cancelled it. That promised 500 new cops, and now gang members outnumber police, and we still don't have that 500 number. They promised to keep fees free and pay equity processes before cancelling them both for those landlord tax breaks and tobacco company kickbacks, and promised to maintain maximum momentum on climate resilience before cutting the Climate Emergency Response Fund. You are being told that they should be trusted when they say, don't worry, bro, we wouldn't do that. And instead of pulling the bill to rewrite it so that it has something more explicit that allows for the sales that he's claiming the bill is designed for, like gravel pits and rundown buildings full of asbestos, he's keeping it as is, which doesn't fill people with confidence that this isn't a step towards allowing the coalition, the coalition that set up a fast-track process with a minister who openly said he wants to strip the entire country of resources, including dockland, and who overspent tens of thousands of our tax dollars to go to a mining convention in Canada that he wanted to go to sell off dockland to the highest bidder with the biggest mining equipment. What changes to the Act mean Dock also has to change their focus to being more about economic returns. I'm sure nothing could possibly go wrong. And there's the New Zealand First's absolutely ridiculous definition of gender bill also closing that day. This is a bill which is so poorly written it would end up defining birds and fish as adult humans. It redefines what age adults are adults legally. It erases intersex people from law completely. It risks healthcare access according to health organisations. It breaches human rights according to the Human Rights Commission. It's legally redundant according to legal scholars. It breaches Te Tiriti by erasing traditional indigenous concepts of gender fluidity and Takatapui people and their status as taonga. It creates a cascade of confusion in a huge range of laws because it impacts the laws around making laws and is a clearly imported culture war topic designed to punch down on a tiny minority while the economy burns, people flee the country, and the environment keeps trying to tell us that we suck and that it's in charge. So you can head to the parliamentary website at parliament.nz and find all the submissions that are open. There's like 7 at the moment. It's super easy. And there's a ton of awesome resources from some really passionate, clued up people on things that you can put in your submissions that you can find online. But and this is really important, your submission needs to be your own words. Don't cut and paste a template, because that only counts as one submission no matter how many times it gets sent in. And avoid using AI if that's discovered. That completely negates your entire submission. Talk about how a bill impacts you or your whānau, your community, your business. Talk about your expertise or lived experience. Like, I'm going to talk about how I watched a member of the Social Services Committee in university slam a reporter against the wall and call him the homophobic F-slur for not printing what he wanted, and why that sort of attitude is feeding into the gender definition bill noise. Your submission can be as long and detailed or short and sharp as you want, just not so sharp that you put in any swears, because, that also disqualifies your submission. So, hunker down in the bad weather, keep safe, keep warm, and let's get submitting. Hello there, kia ora podcast listeners. This episode was a bit of an interesting one because I'm filling in space. Like, there's just so much stuff going on, and it's so impossible to keep a rein on it all the time, and the weather is terrible and kind of gloomy, and just dealing with a whole bunch of, it feels like I haven't had a break in ages. And it's not true, I have, I know, it's all sorts, all over the place kind of stuff. So I wanted to do something simple and helpful and useful, and that's what today's episode is all about. I wanted to encourage people to make sure that they get their submissions in as soon as possible for these bills that are coming through, because there's some really nasty bills that are currently about to hit select committee process. They include the gender definition bill, which is just so awful for so many reasons, but it's also stupid. Like, it's not just a bill that I think is stupid because they've done stupid, that they're from a stupid party that are doing cultural stuff. It's literally a stupid bill that makes no sense once you give it 2 seconds of forethought. But the fact that National and ACT supported this bill, that fucks me off so much. But then there's also other stuff that's making headlines at the moment. The Conservation Act one is a really interesting one that I'm sort of looking on the outside going, okay, I get the playlist from National, we wouldn't sell off all of this dock land, but they've changed the legislation on the quiet to make dock focus more on economic returns. And if they don't want to have people think that they're going to leave it as an option, they could change the law. So they're really specifically talking about rundown assets, for example, as being eligible for sale. But they don't want to do that. They just want to make TikToks going, no, we would never. Why don't you trust us? The party that's lied to you consistently for years and told you were going to be better off, and you're not. Why would you not trust us when we tell you this? So yeah, that's a really fascinating one for me. They're all really interesting bills in their own way. The move on order one, I fucking hate. I hate the fact that it came from Ryan Hamilton originally, from Hamilton. It is a nasty, vile piece of legislation that shows just how little the government considers homeless people to be real people. And it is disgusting. And to make it even worse, you've got something that the government actually did that wasn't terrible. Putting somebody in charge of mental health and making that a portfolio and making that a focus. You have the person behind that going, you know what, we're going to make this worse for people. We're going to make people's mental health worse that are in this really specific situation. I'm going to celebrate it. And that, it just shows to me how shallow these people are. How shallow the lot of them. I'm just, not impressed. Not at all. So that's what today's episode is about. If you'd like some suggestions, you want to give me suggestions on other things that you'd like to see me do videos about, please flick them my way. I'm always up for some new ideas. People keep sending me stuff all the time, which is really fascinating, and I really do wish I could print more of it, put more of it out there. I'm also, actually, this is probably one that you guys can roll in on, and I don't know how many people actually sit down and listen to this part of the podcast specifically. I want to make sure that by the time we get to the end of July, beginning of August, that this is a lot more self-sufficient, if that makes sense. My big contract is coming to an end at the end of July, so I got to find a way to make more money, and that means either going and getting a job, which means I have less time to make content, or increasing the amount of money that I get from something like this. And I am not comfortable doing the whole, please, can you give me money? I really don't like doing that. I would prefer to make money through things like advertising, which means that I need to put out content on places that pay for that kind of stuff, which is YouTube and Facebook at the moment, because we don't have monetization for stuff like TikTok in this country. So I'm really keen to hear what you guys want. I don't just want to make stuff, so it brings the money. It's so easy to make clickbaity things and to make stuff that people sit there and just go, oh yeah, I can take 2 seconds of this and I get paid for it. I want stuff that has actual value that people want to continue watching. So I would love some suggestions on different sorts of content that you might like. Do you want something that's more like hyper-local focused? Do you want to talk about what your council's doing? Do you want more deep dives, more policy information? And then I also have to realize that there's an election in like 4 months, and so after the election, a lot of this content would need to change anyway. So yeah, I would really love some feedback on this. Up to you guys, of course you don't have to, but it would be really interesting to hear or see what you guys think would be a useful tool going into the election and useful tools for after the election. Right, that's it. Now I'm going to sign off. Go hit that subscribe button or share button or whatever. Look after yourselves, keep dry in the weather, ka kite anō. I will catch you guys all tomorrow.